If we follow the road south through the middle of the island, eventually we'll come upon a drive-in theater to the right. The lights are still lit up, even after all this time. This is the Meadows Drive-In Cinema, featuring twin projection screens. On the first screen, the theater was playing Last Stand at Fort McGee, and on the second screen they were playing Night of the Fishman's Revenge, the day the bombs dropped. When we arrive, we see a film playing from screen 1, and then we see it, silhouetted against the light, are the unmistakable humanoid forms of feral ghouls. As we creep closer, we can look up at the theater. We see the film coming through the projection room, and we can inch our way closer, ever so carefully, to avoid detection, so that we can watch the film too. I have never seen anything capture the attention of feral ghouls the way that this film has captured the attention of these. It makes you wonder, were feral ghouls attracted to the lights and the sounds from all over the island until this drive-in theater was filled with feral ghouls? Or are these the very ghouls of the people who were watching movies at this theater the day the bombs dropped? We do know that in some cases, ghoulism can happen quite quickly, like what happened with Moira Brown and Megaton, if we choose to detonate the bomb in the middle of the town. So ghoulism can happen quickly. Perhaps these are the ghouls of the people who were watching films that day. On screen number 1, we see a trailer for The Fightin' Furies, Last Stand at Fort McGee, starring Keith McKinney and Stanley Van Robb. Now, as I explored in a previous video, we get to meet Keith McKinney. He's alive and well 200 years after the bombs dropped, for his mind was preserved in a RoboBrain chassis in the underground luxury Vault 118. Keith McKinney is involved in the murder mystery that takes place there. I did a video on the topic, which you can watch here. But back at the theater, this trailer loops. It just plays the intro credits slide over and over and over again. Now, since these ghouls are distracted, we might as well take advantage of the opportunity to explore the place. Turning around, we can head towards the big projection structure in the middle of the cinema. This should be very familiar to us. It's almost identical to the Starlight Theater that we find in the Commonwealth. After unlocking a novice-locked door, we can crawl on in. Turning left, we find a Nuka-Cola machine with quite a lot of Nuka-Cola inside, and right next to it, we find a Porta Diner. Looks like a man succumbed to the nuclear fallout while he was trying to get a perfectly preserved pie from this machine. On the edge of the Porta Diner, we find 2 blocks. G.L. Good luck. Which of course makes sense because we need good luck in order to get this accursed perfectly preserved pie. And of course, I fail yet again. Facing south, we see the shop area. The cash register is still here, but we also find a cymbal clacking monkey trap. I was curious to see if this was attached to anything, so I turned on my flashlight and stood up, but triggering it had no effect. It didn't even alert the ghouls. Facing north, we can explore the restaurant portion. Here we see a skeleton crammed into one of these diner seats, right next to a big poster advertising one of the features, Night of the Fishman's Revenge. See it in stunning terror vision. Is it just me, or does this fishman look an awful lot like a Mirelurk King? How did movie poster designers know what a Mirelurk King would look like hundreds of years before the creatures evolved? Well, it must just be a coincidence. Next to him is a female skeleton. I take it the nuclear blast knocked her off her feet, and she was trying to crawl back into her seat when she succumbed to either her wounds or the radiation. We find the skeleton of a man next to another cash register. This guy is holding a fire extinguisher. I'm guessing that he might have been trying to put out some fires, possibly started by the nuclear blast before he died. On the opposing wall, we find a poster for the other feature playing here, The Fightin' Furies, Last Stand at Fort McGee. Both of these posters are beautiful. I want to hang them on a wall in my house. Going through the eastern door, we can head up some steps. There's a door that brings us out onto the wing that covered the cars as they drove through, but there's nothing terribly interesting out here. Instead, we can climb the second staircase to the projection tower. Here we see the skeleton of the man who was running this projector. And above us we see the long projector, and it's connected to a circuit breaker on the wall via some wires. Now, I don't know about you, but when I see a big red button or a big circuit breaker on the wall, I have to push it. Flipping the circuit shuts down the movie. At first, the ghouls do not seem to mind, but after a brief moment, they turn around and start to walk away. Where are they going? It was only then that I realized that I heard something else playing. Turning around and going down the stairs, we see that the other movie is now being projected onto screen 2. Getting closer, we can watch the feral ghouls lumber over like zombies towards the horror flick. And after a short period of time, the entire congregation stands before the second screen. If we're careful, we can edge closer to watch the film ourselves. And just like the cowboy flick, this one appears to just be the trailer.
Out of the mist and slime, of a time before the history of man, birthed from the deep of Earth's unexplored oceans, comes an abomination science cannot comprehend, to menace the Earth and attack.
Now, we have a number of options here. We can destroy these ghouls the good old pain train way and just lumber on in as fast as we can. And once we have their attention, we can pull out our Gatling laser and make good use of the nearby potentially explosive vehicles. Crude, but effective. Alternatively, we could let the nearby cars do most of the damage for us. Perching ourselves on top of the building, we can take aim at these cars, and as they explode, the blast takes care of most of these ghouls. The ones left alive, at least, are maimed. Where'd your arms go, buddy? What you gonna do? Bite me to death? Or we can use the unique features of this location to our advantage. Thanks to the projectors, we can control the movements of these ghouls. I've got a stack of bottle cap mines with me. We know exactly where these ghouls are going to walk. They're going to walk underneath the wings of this structure. We can litter the ground with some of these bottle cap mines, making sure to spread them out enough so that they don't detonate each other. When done, we can then go to the projector room and flip the circuit to switch the screens.
After today, it's gonna be hard to go back to patrolling the place.
And like clockwork, the ghouls will leave one screen and walk across our minefield to the other. A few managed to get through, but most of them were completely incapacitated. If not outright killed, the blasts took off all of their limbs, and it was easy work to just find them, walk on up, and end their misery. Now, all of these options are spectacular, but I wanted to find a way to kill these ghouls without damaging any of the vehicles so that I could explore them later. So I climbed up on top of the building, fired one shot just to get their attention, and then waited. I was able to pick off most of them one by one as they came through the door, until finally I had a pile of feral ghouls on the roof of this building. With the ghouls dead, I was free to explore. Now the second picture comes out of a different projector booth facing the opposite direction. Heading over to that wing of the structure, we can take the stairway up to the top, where we find a manager's key resting on top of a steamer trunk. The circuitry they've got here is pretty interesting. If I flip a circuit once, nothing happens. But if I go back and flip it again, only then does the movie switch. Seems like an odd system to have set up here. Heading back to the other projector booth, we can loot the mentats on the floor and the newsboy cap if we want one. And right next to this guy was a Vault-Tec lunchbox. Now we can go and explore the other buildings here. Heading north towards the entrance, we find a big shack right next to the Eden Cinemas sign. This shack was none other than a pre-war bathroom. And strangely enough, inside one of the stalls, we find a fully intact Giddy-Up Buttercup, drinking from one of the toilets. This may have belonged to one of the children who came to the theater to watch a cowboy flick. The child was so excited, he brought his favorite Giddy-Up Buttercup toy, but when he arrived, he couldn't find a trough, so he placed the toy in a toilet. Now let's check out some of these cars by theater number 2. In the back of one picker-up truck, and yes, that is its name. I did a video on pre-war cars in the Fallout universe. If you don't believe me, you can find a link to that video here. But anyway, in the back of a picker-up truck, we find a skeleton surrounded by booze. Well, at least he died doing something that he loved. In a big rusted-out Corvega, we see that the seats of the car have been dislodged from the thing. I'm impressed by the detail that was placed into these seats. And hanging outside the door is another skeleton. Closer to the theater, we find a Rocket 69, and we see a little bit about how this vehicle functioned. The doors opened by sliding up instead of opening out. Now we can go and explore the big screen itself, but before we do, we see another shack directly behind it. Inside this shack is an ammo container on the ground, a weapons workbench, a first aid kit, and a toolbox. We see 2 big rusted-out tractors back here. Heading out and going back to the screen, we can find a door that leads to an employees-only area. In this little room is the manager's safe. We can unlock this with the manager's key. Inside, we find a random assortment of loot. All that's left is a cooler on a table that we can loot, an employee's skeleton on the ground, and 2 Nuka-Cola machines in the back still filled with Nuka-Cola. Coming around the corner, we see a big red machine attached to this screen, and right next to it is a door that leads to a maintenance office. We find the skeleton of one maintenance employee lying directly beneath a wall safe that can only be opened by using the nearby terminal. Inside the terminal, we find a bunch of lore, including a list of upcoming releases. Here we get to learn exactly what kind of movies pre-war America was consuming before the world ended. The first one is Invaders from Beyond Our Galaxy. Elliot Manfield stars once again as Blast Hannigan, dashing space rogue. As the evil Zebulon Empire plans its final push against the Earth colony of Neptune, Blast must make peace with the tribal Neptunians and their ruler, the intoxicating Queen Zarla. Can the Earth colonists and the barbaric Neptunians put aside their differences to repel their common enemy? Coming December 2077. I can't hear the word Neptunians without thinking about Futurama. Every now and then you need to knock it up a notch with a blast from your Spice Weasel. Bam! I'm Elzar. The next upcoming release was Manzilloid vs. Roborilla. The giant man-lizard Manzilloid is back, and this time he has Seattle in his sights. But after 5 attacks, the US Army is ready. They've created the perfect opponent. Meet Roborilla, 8,000 tons of Detroit steel and American ingenuity. He's our only hope against the radioactive reptile. This is, of course, a reference to the film Godzilla vs. the Mechagodzilla, which had a similar plot. But I'm just glad to see a reference to Seattle, my home city in the Fallout universe. This isn't the first time. If you play Atomic Command, that little Pip-Boy game, you get to see the Space Needle. And Seattle was going to appear in Project V13, the canceled Fallout MMO that Interplay was developing. But in terms of actual canon lore, at least now I know that Seattle existed in the Fallout universe and that the Space Needle was a major landmark. That gives me at least a small amount of hope for a Fallout that takes place in the Pacific Northwest someday. Crossing my fingers, folks. The next one is The Murder Express. Trapped on a train, no chance of escape, and a murderer is on the loose. Grant Hillman and Audrey O'Brien star in this thriller from acclaimed director Bernard Switchback. With more twists and turns than ever before, this one will have you guessing until the very end. Note to theater owners, the conductor did it. Way to spoil it for me, guys. I'm thinking that this is a reference to Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express, featuring none other than Hercule Poirot and his little gray cells. The next one is Animal Magnetism. Jack Limes, Tony McKenzie, and Donna Monroe star in this madcap comedy about a couple of zookeepers vying for the attention of the zoo's newest primate specialist, Dr. Jill Swinger. She's an educated, liberated woman, but they're sure all she needs is a man to set her straight. Turns out, she's about to make a monkey out of the both of them. You'll go bananas for this uproarious flick, co-starring Bongo the Gorilla. Pre-war America in Fallout. Never change. Never change. Finally, we have Into the Hollow Earth. Imagine a place where prehistoric monsters still roam free. At the base of a dormant volcano lies the entrance to a world within our world. Welcome to the Hollow Earth, a world of mystery and excitement, a land of terrible beasts, lost civilizations, and savage magic. A world that Jules Verne could only dream about. Now available in spectacular Dinovision. Note to theater owners, Dinovision not available in most areas. This, I think, is a reference to Journey to the Center of the Earth, a 1959 film based on the Jules Verne novel. I guess it's supposed to be ironic that they actually call out Jules Verne in this, saying that it's a world only he could dream about, when he did actually dream about a world just like this, and made a book about it. And there was a film about it before this film. Leaving upcoming releases, we can check out the manager's note on ticket prices. Here we learn that the Eden Meadows Cinemas has decided to raise ticket prices by $10. They immediately try to convince people that this isn't because ticket sales are decreasing, but rather because ticket sales are higher than ever, and the company wants to capitalize on the popularity of these films. The final note is manager's note on repairs, and here we learn that the strange circuit breaker setup that we see here is the same as it was pre-war. The manager says that power issues are causing an inability to have both projectors working at once. Please look into it as soon as possible and advise. This is a little bit confusing to me because we find skeletons in the cars at both screens. But if even before the war we are to believe that only one screen was working, were the people watching the horror flick staring at a blank screen? At any rate, from here we can unlock the nearby wall safe, where we find a random assortment of loot. I believe the skeleton beneath this safe belonged to the electrician here at the theater, because the messages on that terminal read like they came from management and were directed towards maintenance. Heading out and then immediately turning left, we can go into the screen itself, just like we can at the Starlight Drive-In. Climbing the stairs to the very top, we find a great view, but aside from that, not much else. At the very end, we find some caps and a duffel bag filled with randomized loot. Now, I thought I saw something hanging as I climbed those stairs, so leaping from atop this screen, we can turn west to walk behind the screen. And here we find a rather disturbing scene. A teddy bear has been lynched from one of the screen's support girders. Either lynched or he somehow committed suicide. Directly beneath this teddy bear is a ProSnap camera. Are we to gather that this teddy bear was a photographer? Why would anyone want to lynch a photographer? Or is this a reference to some sort of movie that I'm not familiar with? At the end of this narrow gap is a metal box where we find some Mentats, and that's it for this screen. Heading to the other side of the cinema, we can explore the cars parked here. In one, we find a sad scene. A loving young couple died in their Rocket 69. He still has his arm around her. Looks like they didn't have a moment to move before they died. In a blue car next to this one, we find a skeleton face down into the cement with his legs still in his seat. This guy tripped out out of his car as his last moment in life. And in the big rusted out Corvega right next to this, we find what is possibly one of the oddest skeletons I've found in any Fallout game. We find a skeleton with his own skull in his hand, pushing it out of the front window. Zooming in closer for a better look, we find a pair of spectacles on this skull. The skeleton lies on the floor of this car, which means that the car seats must have been removed first. This, I think, is evidence that raiders possibly posed the skeleton at some point. But the skeleton wasn't content to spend eternity at a drive-thru without being able to see the picture, so he plucked off his own skull, put on some glasses, and stuck it out the windshield. Well, at least he's taken advantage of his front row seats. In the red pickup truck right next to this one, we find an unusually large teddy bear. A great find for anyone with a teddy bear collection. Finally, we see a big, busted-out lobster grill van. There's a suitcase and a duffel bag hanging out of this thing. I never know which of these are shells for those large hermit crabs, so I went ahead and took a shot. But it didn't react, so I think we're safe. If we head just outside the cinema, we can walk around the perimeter. We see that the cinema had been built up to keep it level with this big cement foundation. This may also be due to it being located so close to this watery swamp area. At the very back of this second screen, we see another sign advertising the theater and the 2 shows playing. Heading up top, we can take a look inside the screen only to find a legendary ghoul who was sleeping. He didn't attack with the others. Once he's dead, we can go inside where we just find an ammo crate. Thankfully, nothing hanging from the girders in this one. The employee's only door behind this screen is boarded shut. We can't get in. But we can use the manager's key to open a door on the far end where we find another ghoul sleeping peacefully. After he's dead, we can loot a couple of wooden crates filled with chems. Turning round the corner and going up the stairway behind the screen, we see a little picnic area with a table and some chairs set out. And at one time a scavenger slept up here, we find a cooler right next to a sleeping bag. And that is the full story of the Eden Meadows Cinema. We find still playing flicks on the island near Far Harbor. I had a lot of fun with this encounter when I discovered it for the first time. It was a welcome surprise, and I love how Bethesda took the time to make these short little flicks, even if they are just the trailers. But what are your thoughts? What do you think can explain how the ghouls have been enraptured by these movie trailers for 200 years? Do you think their human brains have rotted to such an extent that ghouls can be easily distracted by loud noises and flickering lights? If so, I wonder if there's a way we can weaponize this knowledge. A gun that produces some sort of mesmerizing blast that can stun ghouls for an extended period of time. Who knows, maybe we'll see something of the sort in future games. And are you like me and would you love to see a Fallout game set in Seattle? Share your thoughts with me in the comments section below. I read all of your comments and I use your comments as inspiration for my future videos. I publish a new video 6 days a week, so if you want to make sure that you don't miss my next one, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I've got a t-shirt shop, folks. You can find a link to my shop in the description below. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers get access to a private channel on my Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, with a brand new video.